Some disputes begin quietly. A fence post here, a measurement there, a strip of land no one pays attention to. But sometimes that small detail becomes something larger. This is the story of a homeowner who noticed their neighbor slowly pushing into land that wasn't theirs, and what it took to stand firm and fight back. Property lines seem simple on paper. Every home comes with a deed and a survey that outline exactly where one person's land ends and the next begins. But in many neighborhoods across the United States, boundaries blur over time. Old fences tilt. Trees move. Previous owners forget to check measurements before building. And in the background of it all is a legal concept called adverse possession. A rule that can allow someone to claim land if they use it long enough without challenge. The homeowner in this story never imagined any of these rules would matter. They bought their house for peace and comfort. The backyard had an aging wooden fence, a few overgrown plants, and a quiet space to sit outside. The neighbor next door seemed friendly. They exchanged small talk. They waved across the yard. Nothing seemed unusual. But one morning, everything shifted. A new fence post appeared. It looked normal at first glance, but something felt off. It was not on the same line as the old fence. It stood about a foot inside the homeowner's property. At first, the homeowner assumed it was a mistake. Maybe the contractor misread the layout. Maybe the neighbor simply didn't realize. The homeowner approached politely, asking about the new post. The neighbor smiled, but the response didn't settle anything. They insisted the new placement was correct. They said the old fence was never exactly on the line, and brushed off the concern as nothing serious. They didn't offer any documentation. They didn't check the property survey. They simply shrugged up, but the homeowner remained uneasy. A week later, more posts appeared. Each one pushed deeper onto land that didn't belong to the neighbor. The homeowner pulled out the deed. They compared it with the original survey. Everything was clear. The new fence line was wrong. A second conversation followed, this time more direct. The neighbor held their position firmly. They said the fence was staying where it was. They added something troubling, that they had always used that strip of land, and that the homeowner shouldn't make it a problem. Those words raised a red flag. Claims like that often relate to establishing long-term use, a step toward adverse possession. The homeowner decided to act before the situation got worse. They hired a licensed surveyor. After scanning and measuring the yard, the surveyor marked the actual property line with bright orange flags. The final report was clearer. The new posts were inside the homeowner's property dot, armed with proof. The homeowner spoke to the neighbor again, but the neighbor dismissed the survey. They said surveyors make mistakes. They claimed the flags were moved, and they continued building anyway. At this point, the homeowner realized the issue was not a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. So they documented everything. They took photos of the posts, videos of the construction, notes of every conversation, including dates and details. They wanted a full record if things escalated. Next, they contacted an attorney who specialized in property law. After reviewing the deed, the survey, and the timeline, the attorney gave clear advice. If the fence was allowed to stand on the homeowner's land, the neighbor could eventually claim that space. The law recognizes use, even when it begins incorrectly, if the rightful owner never objects. A formal letter went out. It demanded that construction stop immediately and included all necessary documents, the deed, the recent survey, and a request for written acknowledgement. The tone was professional, not aggressive, but it carried legal weight. For a few days, the yard fell silent. No hammering, no drilling, no new posts. The homeowner hoped the issue was resolved, but instead, the neighbor filed a complaint of their own. They claimed they were being harassed and prevented from improving their property. Local authorities arrived to sort out the situation. The homeowner stayed calm. They presented the survey, photographs, and the attorney's letter. The officer reviewed everything carefully. The officer advised the neighbor to halt construction until the legal disagreement was resolved. That moment shifted the conflict. The neighbor removed the posts they had installed. Work stopped entirely. The homeowner wanted a permanent solution. They filed a civil action to legally enforce the property line. In court, the evidence spoke clearly. The judge reviewed the survey, the photos, the documentation, and the timeline. The conclusion was straightforward. The fence was being built on land that did not belong to the neighbor. The court ordered the neighbor to remove all remaining materials. They were instructed to stay off the disputed strip of land and warned against making future changes without written agreement. With the order in place, the fence was rebuilt correctly, aligned with the official boundary. The neighbor kept their distance after that. No more casual conversations. No more waves across the yard. Just quiet separation. Although the conflict was stressful, the homeowner protected their property by taking measured steps. Not by escalating, not by arguing, but by relying on documentation, professional guidance, and the legal system. Situations like this happen more often than many people realize. A few inches on a property line might seem unimportant, but in real estate, those inches define ownership, value, and future rights. When boundaries shift, even by accident, it can create years of confusion. When they shift on purpose, they can lead to legal battles. This story highlights the importance of paying attention to details, keeping clear records, and acting early when something seems wrong. A deed outlines ownership. A survey confirms the line. Photos and written communication create a timeline that holds up in court. This homeowner didn't win because they argued louder. They won because they stayed calm, remained factual, and understood their rights. They didn't ignore the problem. They didn't let uncertainty drag on. They documented everything, sought legal help, and let the evidence speak out in the end. This wasn't just a story about offense. It was a story about standing up for what's yours without unnecessary conflict. It was about protecting a home, a boundary, and the value of knowing the rules that govern property. And it showed how even a quiet homeowner, acting with clarity and patience, can stop someone from taking advantage of an unclear line. After the court ruling, the homeowner thought the situation was over. The fence was corrected, the boundary was clear, and for a while, everything stayed quiet. The neighbor kept to themselves, no conversations, no conflicts. Just silence, but silence does not always mean peace. A few months later, the homeowner noticed something new. Small stakes, thin wooden markers began appearing near the back corner of the yard. They were not part of the official survey. They were unmarked, and they were positioned just inches away from the property line. The homeowner didn't panic. Instead, they documented the stakes and waited to see what would happen. 2 days later, the neighbor appeared with a measuring tape and a shovel. They were working near the exact area the court had ruled on. Number. Construction had started yet, but the message was clear. The conflict might be returning, just in a different form. The homeowner decided not to confront them. Instead, they contacted the attorney again and explained what was happening. The attorney advised waiting before reacting. A stake alone isn't a violation, but if those stakes turned into a structure or a fence, that would cross the boundary set by the court. The homeowner watched carefully. Every day, they walked the yard, checking the stakes, noting any updates. For 2 weeks, nothing changed. Then one morning, a new sound echoed through the yard. The neighbor was digging deeper this time, near the back corner where the old fence used to lean. When the homeowner looked closer, they saw bags of concrete and a stack of metal posts. The neighbor was preparing to build again. The homeowner acted quickly. They took photos of the materials, the new holes, and the alignment of the stakes. They emailed everything to the attorney. Within hours, the attorney drafted another letter reminding the neighbor of the court order and warning that further violations could lead to additional legal consequences. The letter was delivered the next morning. This time, the neighbor reacted immediately. They stopped digging. They covered the holes with loose dirt. They even removed the bags of concrete, but they didn't leave quietly. They made comments across the yard short, sharp remarks about how they had the right to improve their space and how the homeowner was making things difficult. The homeowner didn't respond. Silence was safer. Silence kept the situation controlled. A week passed with no new activity. The stakes remained, but nothing happened around them. The homeowner considered removing the stakes themselves, but chose not to. The attorney had advised against touching anything the neighbor placed, just in case it later became evidence. During this time, the homeowner realized something important. The conflict wasn't just about a fence or a strip of land. It was about pressure. The neighbor was testing boundaries, not just legal ones, but psychological ones. They wanted the homeowner to give up, to stop paying attention, to look the other way. And if that happened, even once, the neighbor could use that opening later. The homeowner stayed consistent. They documented everything. Date, time, photos, short notes, nothing dramatic. Just facts. Then, unexpectedly, an officer from the local police department visited the neighborhood. The neighbor had filed another complaint, claiming the homeowner was harassing them by watching their property. The officer explained that simply observing activity on your own land is not harassment. The homeowner remained calm, showed the previous court order, and provided a clear timeline of events. The officer took notes and walked next door to speak with the neighbor. The discussion was brief. Afterward, the neighbor retreated inside. No more comments. No more digging, but the story did not end there. A few days later, the homeowner received a letter from the county office. The neighbor had filed a request to adjust the boundary line. They argued that the original marker was incorrect and that the land should be measured again. The county required both parties to participate before any adjustment could happen. The homeowner declined the request. They sent copies of the court ruling and the survey, making it clear that the boundary had already been legally established. The county closed the request. The neighbor's attempt to move the line had failed. This moment changed everything. After the county's response, the stakes disappeared overnight. The neighbor stopped making comments. No more digging. No more attempts to push into the land. It seemed that every available tactic had been tried and had failed. The homeowner felt a shift, not just legally, but mentally. They had learned that protecting property is not a one-time action. It is ongoing awareness, it is patience, it is consistency, and above all, it is the willingness to take small steps before a small problem becomes a permanent one. Months passed without incident. The yard stayed quiet. The boundary remained untouched. And although the relationship between the two neighbors would never return to the casual friendliness it once had, the homeowner finally felt secure. What they gained wasn't just a strip of land, it was clarity. It was confidence. And it was the understanding that standing up for what's yours doesn't rely on force or emotion. It relies on documentation, right actions, and steady resolve.